There were some dark moments. Holy shit. I thought I was a relatively tough individual until that.
We ought to probably have dinner sometime. But if you ask me what I'm most proud of is that I got control of my own life, that I would decide my fate.
It exceeds any difficulty and pain that I ever experienced professionally.
I know what it's like to have to do something in a tough situation. I don't have to make something important, but what I have to try to do is make something you'll never forget.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Change Agents, an Ironclad original, presented by our friends just down the road at Montana Knife Company. Today's episode is a little bit different. It is with filmmaker Kevin Costner, who co-wrote, directed, and stars in the new film Horizon, an American Saga. And this is the first of a 4-part series that is going to be coming to a theater near you. We talked about a lot of things. The history of our own country, why these stories are important, the character development, the essential need to drive towards the unknown and challenging things, physically and mentally. It was an honor to sit down and talk with Mr. Costner. I've been a fan of his work for a long time, and I hope you enjoy the conversation. Let's get into it. I like how you roll, Mr. Costner, getting shit set up.
Good. Well, let's go with Kevin and we'll be in good shape.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Is this all your day? Just media all day, interview to interview?
Yeah, it kind of has to be. If I just come here for nothing, I might as well just work. You know, it's time to get it done. You know, you make these movies and you make them for people. And when you're an independent filmmaker, you know, you're almost running twice as fast, you know, because there's no machine behind you. There's just, what can you do? So, you know, it is like a mom and pop store with me. I do the dishes too. So, you know, I'm here. But really, you want to. The good thing on my side is I'm trying to talk to the people that have a level of influence, because you know, that's what I need to talk about. So it's possible you don't like the movie. That's fair enough. But I make it with the idea that you are going to like it, and so doing the press is something I have to do. So I'm no crying in baseball.
Yeah. Well, I did like the movie. However, I'm like right down the middle of the fairway for who the movie was made for. I love stories about people diving into the unknown, risking everything, riding west literally on wagons with no suspension or on horseback or walking and having no idea what is over the horizon. I guess no pun intended given the name of the movie. But to me, I have always found the greatest value in my life of pursuing things like that, difficult things with an unknown or uncertain end state. So, long way of saying, I did enjoy the movie for sure. So I think you guys put together a great piece.
Yeah, I mean, it's like when you see something in your mind, we have this life, right? And we've gone to the movies, you and I, and, you know, for as phony movies can be, we also learn about a certain kind of heroism when we see it, and we think to ourselves, well, shit, I want to be that guy. I don't want to be that guy. And when you see heroism sometimes and the guy's defeated and the other guy wins, you say, I still want to be that guy because of what he stood for. And so I've learned a lot from the movies about who I want to be. Now, trying to be those guys, that's a little bit different. That's a little bit different because they're movies and the bullets aren't real. And the situations aren't real, but you and I run into tough stuff. And I think to myself, am I going to wilt like a daisy because at first no one wants to make this movie? I'm just going to be confused by it because I think it's a solid offering. I think it's something that a lot of people, for them, it's right down the middle. And hopefully right down the middle doesn't make it oversimplified. It means I want to close my eyes when I go to the theater and I want somebody to take me somewhere in an authentic way. Do these people kind of look like they probably look? Do they talk the way they probably had to talk? Are they dealing with issues that they probably dealt with 1,000 times? And if they do, and if I do, then I have a movie that kind of is why I like Westerns. And if I don't do that, if I make it over simple, I don't like those Westerns at all. I don't want anything to do with them. They kind of set me back.
Yeah. I think telling the story of a hero that doesn't come out on top is essential. I'm not a fan of the movies where, you know, the protagonist is always victorious. Literally 36 hours ago, I was in France for the 80th anniversary of D-Day. And one of the last things that we did was we walked the American cemetery that has over 9,000 headstones. And every one of those people, in my mind, is a hero. 45 pairs of brothers that are laid side by side, overlooking Omaha Beach. And I would trade anything to try to live up to that model of heroism that I think that they aspire to. And I mean, they're not in the cemetery because they came out on top, but they were willing to give it all for what they believed.
It'll make you weep. You know, sometimes the only thing, it's often been said, the only thing that can make a man cry is another man. And they were young.
Yeah.
And they were afraid coming across that channel. They didn't know. The night before, they were maybe smoking, trying to build each other up and whatever you did. But at the end of the day, they didn't know what they were going to step into. And so many were left on that beach in such a violent way. But the world was at stake, and they went. And you want to wonder how you're going to do in battle? I'm so suspect, man, of people who say, well, this is how I would have behaved. I'm not so sure. And anytime somebody is, I'm kind of suspect of them. But what you can be sure of is who you want to be.
Yeah.
And that's what I try to take from movies and try to offer up.
It was one of the last things I had on my bucket list. I served for 17 years, and most of that time post-Global War on Terror. So spent a good amount of time overseas and saw sacrifice, unfortunately, firsthand many times in both Iraq and Afghanistan. So I had delayed putting it off because of the power that I thought it would have. And when you stand there, we were there able to go at low tide at 6:30 on Omaha Beach and to stare and look at what those men not only were facing, but drove into headlong. It was, I have a limited vocabulary to begin with, and it exceeds anything, my ability to express sacrifice and service and just the ability to put others above self. It was a moving thing.
Sobering.
Yeah.
It's sobering, and it humbles you. My brother was a Marine in 67, 68. He volunteered when he was 17. You guys might have had the same trajectory, and we're still trying to overcome that war. And he did tunnels, and he passed away, Agent Orange, here a year and a half ago. And it marked him as a 17-year-old. He couldn't even go to country till he was 18, go to boot camp, but wouldn't, let him, serve in Vietnam till he turned 18. So I get it. I've never done that. I've played people in the movies like you, never served in war. I don't know that I'm as brave as you are. I played people smarter than me, people that got us to the moon through their math, through their intellect. Never been that smart. I really had a chance to betray those things, but I never pretend that I am.
I've listened to a few interviews that you've done about specifically Horizon, and you've said that you make movies for men. And I was curious, because I haven't had anybody or heard anybody ask you yet, what does it mean to you to be a man? What are the quintessential qualities that a man needs to have, in your opinion?
Well, I don't know what the quintessential quality is, but when I say make it for men, it's like, I know what it's like to have to do something in a tough situation. I know what it's like to be afraid. I know what it's like to have this thing. And so what happens is I want to try to project, if I can, how I think a man behaves, because nothing bugs us worse than when somebody is acting up there and they're doing something, that's really contrary, that I haven't put you on the horse with me. I haven't put you walking up that hill with me with that young guy who's bullying me. And he's bullying me. And there's a moment where he actually doesn't realize who he's dealing with, but his whole life, if you look at his family, if you look at his father and his brother, they're monsters. So this guy spent a life doing that. And the only reason he's doing it to me is because he's just had a bloodlust. He's just killed somebody. He's also been humiliated by being kicked in the chest and forced to go do something he didn't want to do. So his anger is boiled over so much that he picks the wrong guy. But the problem for me is if any man's watching it, me walk up that hill with them, right away, you know something's wrong. And you're realizing, how is Hayes going to get out of this? And there comes a moment which is quintessential to the West. He's not going to get out of it. There is no law. There's no sheriff to stop this. There's nobody to step in. He's going to have to negotiate this moment by himself. And it takes that whole long walk up that road before he finally clicks his gun. And he clicks it on the guy's back. There's no sense in being fair here. This kid has spooked him. And so when I say I make a movie for a man, I'm thinking I'm making sense to you or to anybody else watching. That's what I do. It doesn't have anything to do with being fair when your life's threatened. There just has to be a moment where you're, and Hayes is just a little spooked. He's not over brave. He's just a little spooked. He has killed. It's not his first instinct. This kid, that's his first instinct. So I make him for men, but the thing I do is I try to make sure there's great women in my movies that have a nobility, that have a vulnerability. I don't, Bull Durham's great, but so is Sarandon. Tin Cup's great, but so is Rene Russo. These movies, we're locked together in this process, and certainly in the West, women have been minimized, and they're not in Horizon.
One of the things I love about that era is that there might have been law on paper somewhere, but these people were at the front leading edge of what was possible. And it didn't matter what the law said. It mattered what was happening in the moment. And my reaction to that video, my background is definitely odd in comparison to most people, but you developed this, I was going to say a radar, but that's not correct. It's more like a FM radio receiver, and you start recognizing crazy and behavior that is off. And my reaction to that scene was long before he got to the point of telling your character, hey, you're running out of houses. It's like, you need to shoot this person long before that because he is crazy.
Yeah, and you tie into that thing. I mean, he says halfway up there, he says, what are you, from China?
Yeah.
And he says, well, and he's getting frustrated because, oh, how come you're making me talk? I'd like you're doing some trick. And you're dealing with a loon.
Yeah.
But he's still, what I want to do is, I don't kill him right there. I want to still be a thinking man in the scene for any of the audience, which is, Hayes is now thinking, what am I going to do here? So now I have a thinking process. So it's like, I've made up my mind, but how am I going to do this, right? How am I going to do this? And finally, I do. And that's what I try to do with all the scenes. I mean, whether it's the little boy pointing a gun at that Native American and his son. And I decided that I would just amp it up with the other character saying, why don't you see if we can get them both? It suddenly turns ugly. That is beyond. Now, anybody in the audience, this is just a game of violent men. Don't forget, these men are frustrated. Some of them have a legitimate reason. They want to hunt these Indians down that did this. But there's others that this is just built into their DNA. And if we believe in post-traumatic stress, we have to understand that after that Civil War, if we believe in it for Vietnam, if we believe in it for Iraq, it's just a different name. We have to believe in it for coming out of the Civil War, which was for 4 years.
Yeah.
30 million people in the country. Everybody was touched by it. So you had guys with sociopathic tendencies, with post-traumatic stress tendencies, or also built-in psychopaths that figured out in the West that if they wanted to take something, it was just a matter of taking it. And what happens is you got a scene, and one of those men is kind of goading this boy into trouble. Now, when you go to 2 and you go to 3, if you take this ride with me, you're going to realize that this kid becomes a product of his environment, and he becomes a dangerous kid. First time you see him, he's lost his family. He's an innocent. Second time you see him, he's trying to be goaded into a fight. He resists it. Third time in a cave, he says, is it going to bother you if you go after people that didn't really do this? No, it won't. Then he gets into ultimate battle, something you've experienced, and that even wilts him. You see him fall to his knees. You see him when they're counting scalps. He doesn't want anything to do with it.
Yeah.
But the next time you see him, he's 7 years older, and he's not the same boy anymore. He has he doesn't care anymore. And I believe in those kind of arcs, in movie making.
I think the arc that you're talking about is one of the likely the truest arcs that's out there. I hope you are enjoying season 2 of Change Agents, which is an Ironclad original. And if you are a fan of the podcast, you know that we are presented by Montana Knife Company, which from where I am sitting right now is a short 2-hour drive, maybe 120 miles due south towards Missoula. I was first exposed to this brand through its founder, Josh Smith. And actually, when I first met him, I wasn't even aware of what Montana Knife Company was. He sat across the table from me. We had a conversation, and I have been a fan ever since. This was a few years ago, and the velocity and trajectory of that company is unbelievable. I directly associate that growth with who Josh is, what he stands for, and what he puts into his product. So a little bit more about Josh. He's been making knives for 30 years. They're made in the USA. They have a multi-generational warranty and free sharpening. They're design tested and they're built by hunters, and MKC's a hunting knife company first and foremost. They sell out their knives sometimes in under 60 seconds. And if you want to see what they have available or what's coming up, surf over to montanaknifecompany.com. They have a new knife drop every Thursday at 7 p.m. Here's what I'm going to say on that. Practice checking out. As ridiculous as that sounds, you need to have your credit card information loaded and practice the checkout process, because they go like that. I cannot even count the number of times I have had a knife taken from my cart because somebody was faster to purchase it than I was. People ask me all the time, what's my favorite blade of theirs? I go with the Mini Speedgo. It is my everyday carry knife. I don't use it for knife fighting. I use it for things that I need a knife for, so usually opening boxes. But it is my favorite blade, and if you're a fan of working knives made for working people, I highly suggest that you check out Montana Knife Company. And I'm going to add to that, let's talk a little bit about the warranty. They have the best warranty program in the industry. No matter if you bought the knife from them directly, or bought the knife from a friend, or it was gifted to you, or if you even found the knife, they're going to honor the warranty for the life of the blade. How awesome is that? Couldn't be more proud to have them as the presenting sponsor of Change Agents. They are a fantastic organization. Ladies and gentlemen, this episode of Change Agents is a special one, and it is brought to you by Horizon, an American Saga. Horizon is a movie, and it's an epic tale from Academy Award-winning director Kevin Costner that celebrates the courage, resilience, and pioneer spirit that built America. The film features the stories of courageous men and women who sacrificed everything for the chance at the American dream. And I was very fortunate. I was sent an advanced screener of this movie, and I'm kind of the target audience for it anyway. So not a lot of marketing required. I love stories of exploration. I love people pushing their boundaries and their limits and launching into the unknown with immense amounts of risk. And this movie captures all of that. People who truly are on wagons and horseback and walking, heading west for the promise of what they think is a better life, not knowing what to expect, and the struggles that come from that. Interpersonal, physical, mental, emotional, all of those things, let alone the physical battles. The movie captures all of that in an essence of realism that makes it the perfect genre of a Western that I love to see. And I think that you would enjoy it as well. This 4th of July, you can make Horizon part of your celebration. Horizon, an American Saga, with Chapter 1 in theaters on June 28th and Chapter 2 in theaters on August 16th. That's right, less than 2 months from flash to bang on Chapter 1 and Chapter 2. You can also join the Frontier Pass at fandango.com for exclusive content and tickets. I hope you enjoy it. I have a saying, I don't know if I originally came up with this or I heard it from somebody else, but if you touch war, it touches you back. I don't think it's possible to experience those things and be the same person on the other end of it. I also don't think it exclusively has to be negative. I do feel I'm a better person because of my experiences. But it's interesting you bring up post-traumatic stress. Dances with Wolves, I watched that when it first came out in the 90s, before I joined the military in 1996. I watched it
What branch of service were you?
I was in the Navy. I was a SEAL for 17 years.
Got it.
Yeah. I watched Dances with Wolves again a few years ago. Have you ever gone back and thought about, to me, it had such a different and profound meaning, because I could see somebody working their way through. That movie, to me, watching it again, was about post-traumatic stress. It was about a man going through the story arc of his experiences and probably doing something that would not be advocated, which is isolating yourself out of the middle of nowhere. It's not necessarily the best, but he has to rebuild the fort. And but you could also look at that as he's rebuilding himself and finding community and finding purpose beyond that. Did you have any idea that it might have that meaning when you were making that particular movie? The first time I watched it, it didn't have that for me. Now at this phase in my life, it's almost the only thing I can see when I watch that movie.
I didn't see it the way you did, but I did see a man who was in such pain. He just decided to break this kind of tie that was going on, this game between the South and the North. I mean, they had times where they took off and just didn't fight each other. They both knew the ground that they were going to cover was too dangerous. These were woodsmen. These are people that understood guns. And so there was a stalemate really going on. And this one guy, me, is in such fucking pain that really he just kind of goes, you know what? I know how to, I don't care.
Yeah.
And I got the story. Mark Twain saw that happen when he was in the Civil War. He was with the Michigan outfit, and he remembered seeing at one time, Mark wasn't Samuel Clemens wasn't a fighter, but he was in the Michigan thing, and they saw a rider going back, and they were all bored, and he said everybody in his troop started shooting at this guy, shooting at him. Finally, they killed him. And they all walked over and saw him. And for everybody else, they had one reaction. And for Mark, who being one of the great writers in our history, backed away, and it marked him forever. And so in dances, there's this thing that happens in war sometimes that almost has nothing to do with war, but it was an arcade. And in that arcade, because these are muzzle-loaded things, there was an opportunity for somebody to cover that ground in a minute and take advantage of it. But the key line for me is, in trying to kill myself, I was elevated to the status of a living hero. And sometimes it's just weird. This is a guy who just wanted to die, so there was nothing heroic about it. And the guy you're watching that somehow you identify with in this really unique way as I'm listening to you, he also had this sense of duty. He also had a poet's heart. He wasn't really a fighter, a battler. He had a poet's heart. He chose to write a journal, and he ultimately was a kind of enough of a man that he decided to clean up this fort till somebody came. He had a sense of duty that may seem silly to other people, but to other people, and he wrote in his journal. And I think I'm actually tying into that to how you feel, which is maybe he liked that alone moment.
He was rebuilding himself when I saw it. It wasn't the fort.
I took it as a person that was just, well, I'm going to do my duty and wait. But there might have been something cathartic in him in those nights that I didn't take into consideration. And ultimately, when he met the enemy, right, they didn't seem like the boogeymen to him. And the more he understood them. So, it's a violent movie, but it's thought of as a very tender movie in a way. It's funny.
Yeah. Like I said, watched it when it came out and years later. And it's funny how the optic of life experience can change how you experience something and the difference in the story and the message. I truly, when I was watching it and watching him rebuild that fort, all I could see was a man trying to rebuild himself through a physical mechanism of where he had a roof over his head. And then from there, once he was able to, the story took a different trajectory for him, as did his life.
Yeah, I think that's the thing about movies is, I make them and I have my feelings about them. And when I treat my story, and I think it's real and honest, I treat my story like a patient that can't speak for itself. So I don't let studio, I don't let committee, I don't let anybody interrupt me when I want to have a woman be so dirty that she just wants to bathe. Well, that doesn't have anything to do with the movie, Kevin. I was seeing a woman bathe in the South, and I said, no, but it's what comes from the bathing. Mm-hmm. Peeping Toms show up. They're in every century. They're in every decade. A man who's elected to be a leader doesn't want to, has to go arbitrate this problem for a husband who won't go arbitrate it for himself. The people he talks to were the big guys that looked early in the movie like guys that would help everyone. Turns out they're kind of rough characters. There's a lot that came out of seeing a woman bathe and also the lesson itself, which is do what other people do. When you see, because they're already, these people, this is a road trip from hell going west. People that went west didn't know each other. They had enough massing where they felt safe to be on the prairie. They weren't necessarily safe, but they looked at their numbers at one point and go, this is enough of us. But they didn't really know each other. And what you realize is that people fended for themselves ultimately. And I like all that. And so the explanation about water is like, look, you've already fucked up the first time when you didn't help when other men were helping with a wagon. You don't draw a picture of it. You get up your ass and you go help. And I wanted to show that. I don't dislike that man at all. I needed to show that character, though, that fish out of water. And then later on, the water, it's the same issue. And finally, I give Luke the speech of, look, this isn't your water. And the biggest lesson is do what other people are doing. And when they do it, you do that way. I'm kind of in love with the language of the West, not necessarily the gunfight. I try to honor the gunfight, and I try to make it as ugly and as unbalaic as possible. I just like it to be a level of sudden chaos, if it feels like that's what it's like.
Did you have a technical advisor on set talking about the specific gunfight of you walking up the hill? And I think it was a water trough that you ended up shooting that guy near. That was, in movies, the power of a pistol. I've watched people do backflips, the explosion. It's crazy how much they overemphasize a ballistic confrontation. That was one of the more, if not the most realistic ends to a person in a gunfight that I've actually seen portrayed on film. Were you working with somebody on that, or did that just happen to be how it went?
That's just how I imagined it. The same in Open Range when I killed that guy in the alley. It's like I didn't even put the camera in close. I put it like a fight. When you see real fighting, you have. So I'm not you, but I've seen absolute violence, and it's ugly. And you usually just see it late. It's already happening. You see it through bodies, and you can tell there's a difference in the level of anger that's happening at that moment. And in any, if it's a life or death struggle. Fortunately, I've never had to witness one of those. And so but there's an ugliness to it, and there's an absoluteness to it. And so when I was imagining that, I imagined those two girls playing dodge fight in the bush. I went and cut those bushes and gave them little trails where they could go in and they could try to fool each other. I mean, my own people that make the film with, they go, Kevin, what are you doing? You're making a maze in this oak. And I said, I need my actors to have this not be it moment, playing tag, and then one bops the other in the head really fucking hard. And but in the gunfight, I just imagined the whole thing. I imagined the water trough getting behind that you've got to find something. So when I'm building, I said I want a water trough right there. Was going to want. I want a mule behind it. I don't know. What happens is for me, I see it in my head, so I just don't forget it. But guns are loud, they're scary and point blank, and it's just, there's a violence to it. But the idea that I didn't have to, I could show that one shot and a reflection was just simply that one outmaneuvered the other. Yeah. And I just did it through a water visual.
Yeah. I mean, he was victorious because he acted early, which I think is your only choice when it comes to crazy. There's a lot of things I like about the Mountain Tough program, but I think primarily what I enjoy is they focus on mental toughness in addition to just the physical toughness. Everything they do is grounded in one purpose: life transformations and being strong between the ears in the mind. And there's also a community of 15,000 plus Mountain Tough athletes. So the community is strong, they're supportive, and they're going to help keep you accountable. So you can train anywhere. You can stream anywhere. You can access guided training and on-demand workouts right from your phone, your tablet, or TV or computer, whatever you're into. And everything you need is in one spot. The Mountain Tough subscription gets you access to all the Mountain Tough programs, new programs, and bonus content. And they have programs for everyone. Those who hit the gym and heavy weights, those who like to work out at home with no gear or minimal gear, and everything in between. Mountain Tough has been the trusted training by the dedicated for years now. including U.S. military, special forces, and dedicated backcountry hunters. There is no excuse for you to not start today. With Mountain Tough, you can conquer your goals with the ideal program for your lifestyle and schedule. Train with equipment or just your body weight on your phone, tablet, TV, or web browser. Most importantly, they will help you train your mindset so you are always ready for anything that life throws your way. Mountain Tough subscribers get full access to world-class home and gym programs, groundbreaking mental toughness training, self-improvement, prehab and rehab, biomechanical form coaching, stretching and mobility flows, nutrition guidance, challenge workouts, and the global Mountain Tough community. Mountain Tough is offering Change Agents listeners an incredible offer. You're going to get 40% off on the all-new Mountain Tough Plus annual subscription with the code CHANGEAGENTS. Go to MTNTOUGH.com and enter the code CHANGEAGENTS to receive 40% off, a savings of about $100 on your Mountain Tough Plus annual subscription. That is MTN, Mike Tango November, Tough.com, and enter the code CHANGEAGENTS to save 40%. That is less than 50 cents per day for the best in-class physical and mental training. Ladies and gentlemen, you may have heard me speak of Four Branches Bourbon very recently. This brand is more than just a bourbon company. They are building a community. Besides being the only spirits company founded by veterans from the Army, Navy, Air Force, and Marines, hence Four Branches, they have set out on a new mission to change the narrative when it comes to drinking alcohol. They fully support drinking responsibly, but their trademark message takes it to the next level with serve honorably, drink honorably. In just 9 short months, they have been able to help raise over $225,000 for multiple charities and will continue to support the veteran and first responder communities with their actions. Lastly, and most importantly, they asked me to remind you, don't drink to forget, but let's sip to remember. You can use the code IRONCLAD10 for a 10% discount when ordering online at fourbranches.com. Again, that code was IRONCLAD10, all one word, all uppercase the way I'm looking at it. And their website is fourbranches.com. Do you have more flexibility? I mean, is that the benefit of, obviously you believe in the project. There was an immense personal investment to see this to fruition. Does that give you the buffer to be able to portray it the way that you want to versus a studio being able to have more control?
Yeah, it does. Because I break all the ties. I doesn't mean I won't listen to people, but I feel like I can just tell when something's off. I can tell when something's trying to minimize something to make it easier on the audience. The audience is going to be fine because I'm going to show a level of humanity at something like that. But, when somebody says, okay, the fight's over, your movie's 2 hours and 51 minutes, we could make it sure the fight's over. But you're reloading and talking. Maybe you could just drop the reloading thing. I said, no, he's frightened. Well, he's the hero. He doesn't need to be frightened. I go, the fuck he doesn't need to be frightened. Yeah. He knows that somebody at any moment with those loud guns could be coming up, but he doesn't know who they are. So, my first instinct in doing that scene was as soon as it was over, I'm reloading. It's only 6.
That's the tactically correct answer, too. That is the tactically correct answer. As soon as you have a space or time, whether you shot 1 round or you shot 12 in a modern era pistol, you are reloading because you don't know where the next gunfight is coming from.
And I don't know that from being in the service, but what I'm saying is I decided to do that when I'm doing my lines with her. If you watch it a second time, I'm doing that because intuitively that seems correct. And when he ultimately tries to define these characters to her later on, he said, all I know was these guys were walking up the hill to kill everybody in that house like they were going to get the mail.
Yeah.
And so to me, that's our Shakespeare. I want language like that. Well, maybe you don't need that scene. We already know what they're like. And I go, nah, I want to see it. So my movies run a little bit longer than other people's movies because that language is important to me. The same way as this woman is just tired of sleeping on the ground. So what can happen is comedy can come out of a real situation. And what I like to say to you, honestly, is I don't think anything suffers from a sense of humor. especially a movie, especially a relationship, your own friendship with your guy friends, with your wife, with your sweetheart, at work. A sense of humor is fun, and movies can afford to have it. And so for her, she's like a bitch on wheels right there. She's tired of it. She makes fun of this guy who's actually saved her life, and you see him beaten up by her a little bit. I find the humor in that. I actually like Hayes more because she's ragging on him.
Yeah. Humor has gotten me, and I would say the people that I worked with closely for years, through the absolute darkest times of our life. The range of emotion that you can experience in the blink of an eye or in a minute of your life is hard to describe. But at the end of the day, I think camaraderie is a mix of shared suffering and humor. It truly, our sense of humor, the community I came from, could be considered dark, probably a little bit more of a gallows humor. But at the end of the day, it was appropriate for the environment. And it truly helped you bridge those moments where you didn't know what to do and you didn't know what to say. It didn't suffer from somebody having a sense of humor.
You just described dilemma. You didn't know what to do. You didn't know what to say. And I'm telling you, in the architecture of movies, that's the place to work an audience to. Because now you have tension. Because why? Because you don't know what to do. The minute you do something, it becomes action. The minute you kiss the girl when you don't know if you're going to, then it becomes romance. But in that moment where you don't know what you're going to do, and if you've created a scene that's tight enough, you really actually don't know, what would I have done? Would I have waited too long? The answer is probably yes, because most of us aren't killers. I'm not a killer. I don't know how I would have performed in war, but I understand it intuitively. Most of the people in the West have never killed anybody. Death was a real curiosity. If word got out that somebody killed a man, it was an odd person to look at. People looked at him differently. It was like he's a man killer. Not everybody killed in the West.
What was it about this story that tugged at you enough where you were willing to make that personal investment?
Those kind of moments I've just described, a woman bathing, a young man making a fatal decision to stay with his father and fight. It broke my heart.
Yeah.
It was a simple word. When the father realizes that there's no going back from this moment. There's your fear, you're mad, maybe you're even proud of him. And he says, "Are you ready, son?" He says, "I think so, Daddy." That, if you're a man, I think could break your heart. That was my son.
Yeah, unbelievable that you were able to actually direct him. I, again, don't know anything about film, but I feel like I would have been in tears trying to get that scene to play itself out. I don't think I would have been able to get through that. Challenging, I'm sure. Do you have any other projects that tug on your heart deep enough that you'd be willing to make that level of personal investment again?
I'm kind of built the same way, so probably, if I get frustrated and I feel like I want to tell it. Movies for me are like little secrets in my pocket. I feel like I want to share them, just like if I read a great book and I wanted to share it, just like if I heard a great song, my instinct is to share it. I'm pretty far out in a limb on this one, about as far as I can be. So I don't feel like I want to do that anymore. But I'm also not going to spit on my life, or I'm not going to look at the pile I have that's just sitting there, right? When that could help my vision. I don't want that to own me either. I want to be smart and keep a foundation where I take care of my children and for their life, because I've worked hard enough to do that. On the other hand, all of my children came to me and said, you want to use that? Use it, because we have everything that we want. And I thought to myself about who my children were that could say that, which is, no, Dad, don't risk it on a movie. Save it for us. None of them said anything except, we just want you to be happy.
Fuck, that's an amazing statement to come from your kids. What, I mean, you have lived a life that I think a lot of people would look to and find it to be inspirational and aspirational, and you've probably gotten to rub shoulders with people that they would either just want to be in the room with or watch or whatever it may be. And I'm just curious, in all of that and all of your experiences, what's been the highlight of your life so far?
One was, I was raised really conservatively. My dad, out of the Oklahoma fist fighter, lost their family. His dad lost everything in the Dust Bowl, grapes of wrath, in Oklahoma. Moved to Compton, lived in Compton, grew up really conservative. My brother joined the Marines at 17. I was 5 years younger than him, and all the stress that my parents were feeling, I didn't want to cause them any more by pursuing my own life. And I knew that what I wanted to experiment with would also, I wasn't a rebellious kid, okay? And I held myself back because I didn't want to cause them any more stress. And I found myself in college with people who really knew what they wanted to do, and I didn't know what I wanted to do. I knew there was something for me in life. I knew I was a storyteller, but as far as I could really hang that on anything, my dad thought I was a daydreamer, which was code for being really fucking lazy. I wasn't. I put myself through school. I worked on commercial fishing boats when I was 17, 18, and paid for my college. I drove trucks. I framed houses. I was on the path to blue collar work, which was fine with me, but I knew in my heart I was a storyteller. And the idea of finally telling, in my senior year of college, really realizing I wasn't good in academia, that this is what I was going to do. I was going to burn my ships and go try to be this thing, even though I didn't know the first thing about it. I had to have a private talk with myself. I had to understand that I wasn't going to please anybody anymore. And I made that decision to do that. And I know it through confusion, and everybody around me who loved me, who cared about me. For those who knew me, maybe kind of snickers, laughs, what the hell does he think he's doing? But getting in touch with myself, really in touch with myself, putting my first foot on the yellow brick road of what my life was going to be, I think is not an iceberg, the tip of an iceberg that anybody else can see. But if you ask me what I'm most proud of, is that I got control of my own life, that I would decide my fate.
It's an awesome answer. It leads to the other side of the coin. What's the hardest thing that you've ever had to work yourself through?
Being divorced with children.
That's my answer as well. It exceeds any difficulty and pain that I ever experienced professionally. I thought I was a relatively tough individual until that. And I have never questioned my place in the world, my value as a man, my ability to be a parent. There were some dark moments. Holy shit. I hope nobody has to go through it, but I do believe you get a better depth of your soul and a sounding of who you are as a man if you can make your way through that.
We ought to probably have dinner sometime.
Yeah, it's I'm a few years out from mine, and I found an amazing woman afterwards, after thinking I was going to be alone for the rest of my life, and it has changed my outlook on life moving forward. And for anybody who's in those trenches, I hope that they can find the same thing, because
good for you.
Yeah, it wasn't something I was looking for. I had committed to this is just going to be me and my solo journey. I'm on a rowboat through life by myself. I didn't think I could take any more pain, to be honest.
Well, look, it's a risk, and this is your life, and there's nothing wrong with love.
Yeah, for sure. Maybe the best way to end it is if you could explain to the audience what do you believe the value to be of stories like this? Why should they want to know these stories? Why should they be invested in these stories?
I don't know, but we go to the theater for some reason. We go sit in the dark for some reason, to be entertained. For some reason, it's a place we go. It's a church, if you will. And I've chosen to be a part of that experience. So what is my thought in being part of this thing. And it's really that what I feel like I don't have to make something important, but what I have to try to do is make something you'll never forget. Because you pay to come, you get the babysitter, you think you're going for some reason, and I'd like you to walk out with just a different feeling of maybe a moment, maybe the way a line was said, maybe there was a look, maybe there was a kiss, maybe there was something left undone. And it sits with you the rest of your life.
Hell yeah. That could be the best answer ever. I'll leave it with just saying thank you for your time. I've been a fan of your work for a long time, and I really appreciate you taking a few minutes out of what I know is a busy day to sit and talk with me. I deeply appreciate it.
Thank you.
I hope everybody enjoyed the episode, and I hope that you go out and watch the movie. I've had a chance to see it. It was fantastic. I highly recommend it. Horizon, an American Saga. Thanks for listening to Change Agents, an Ironclad original, presented by Montana Knife Company. We're going to be back next week with an all-new episode. I'll see you guys then. Thank you, Warner Brothers, for sponsoring this video.
Ain't from here. Something you want to say?
One of the things that I love the most about Horizon, an American Saga, is that it accurately captures the environment that I think these people were living in. And I say living, I don't think they were thriving. I think a lot of the times they were scraping by the skin of their teeth.
What order there is comes from me watching you and watching his fellow. Seeing what'll stand and what he won't.
And I love the tension of this scene. You'll see it when you go and watch the movie as they are walking up a hill, and I'm not going to give away what it is because I want people to see it for themselves. The tension starts to build, and the one thing that stuck out at me in this scene is once you recognize crazy, you have to do something about it.
Your judgment is...
And it gets to a point where you see Mr. Costner's character pull his gun out.
Walter, he says, and they will take from you, and they will keep on taking.
Because he recognizes things are about to turn into a direction where he might have to take lethal action.
You think?
But by Costner's character pulling his gun out early, cocking the lever on his pistol and being ready to go, he is, from a tactical perspective, he's ahead of his adversary. So when the man finally turns around, not only is Mr. Costner's character ready to go, but he has the jump on him.